Jeepers, creepers, where'd you get those peepers? Jeepers, creepers, where'd you get those eyes? Gosh, all get up, how'd you get so lit up? Gosh, all get up, how did it get that size? Golly gee, when you turn those heaters on, woe is me, gotta put my cheaters on. Jeepers, creepers, where'd you get those peepers? Oh, those weepers, how they hypnotise. Where'd you get those eyes? This is the Bureau of Lost Culture. I'm Stephen Coates. Morrissey, Dorothy Parker, Le Corbusier, Andy Warhol, Harold Lloyd, Janis Joplin, Michael Caine, Gloria Steinem, Buddy Holly, John Lennon, Jarvis Cocker. What do they all have in common? Yes, they're all famous people who wore glasses. And in today's episode, we welcome back our old friend, Travis Elborough, writer and countercultural commentator, to talk a little bit about his forthcoming book, Through the Looking Glasses, The Spectacular Life of Spectacles, published by Little Bren in July this year. And it's a deep dive into the wonderful world of eyewear. We cover all sorts of things and all sorts of places. Soho, of course, as usual, Pisa, Pince-Nez, St. Jerome, Buddhists, beatniks, foppish dandies, nerds, wonks, beat poets, all whom in some way were blinded by the light. So, I'm very pleased to welcome him back. Travis, how are you?
Hello, Stephen.
You know, Travis, we're here to talk about the history of spectacles and your wonderful book, Through the Looking Glasses, The Spectacular Life of Spectacles. And that's not the only pun in this book. There are many spectacle-related puns. Some of them are excellent.
Only some, obviously.
Yes. But, Travis, your CV is as long as your lockdown hair. But who are you?
I am a spectacle-wearing author.
Countercultural commentator, I think we'll add into that
Okay.
as well, right? But I mean, the interesting thing about you is that you've always worn spectacles, and you're one of those people who are lucky because they actually look good on you. I'm going to get this out right now, right at the top, is that I should have worn glasses, but I went to a school which was something between sort of Harry Potter and Name of the Rose. Where there was
two great spectacle-related books in one there.
Excellent. We're going to come back to that. But unfortunately, I was kind of mercilessly bullied as soon as I actually wore glasses at school. So it put me off wearing them, and as a result, I've got a weak eye. So I'm just going to drop that in now. So vanity has affected my vision.
I didn't wear them all the time when I was younger. When I was first given them, This is one of those things I don't actually precisely remember when I was given them. I think I was about 7 or 8, but I don't think I was wearing them all the time until I reached my late teens and early 20s, when things like having to drive a car and going to work in an office where you were looking at computer screens or. Yeah.
But it suits you, see. I mean, and I can't imagine you now without glasses. I mean, obviously your profession is writer. And sort of commentators, so it kind of works with that as well. But you're one of those lucky people who it looks good on. Like Michael Caine on the front of your book here. But so it's an unusual thing to write about the history of spectacles, and the reason we like it, Bureau of Lost Culture, of course, is that it's a rare story. It's an unusual story, and we are going to make a connection with the counterculture later on. But give us a quick sort of a tour, a kind of quick journey through the history of the spectacle.
I mean, essentially the spectacles arrive what might be considered comparatively late, given how long civilization has had glass, and there have been some basic uses of lenses for burning things with, but really glasses don't really turn up, or a version of glasses don't turn up until the medieval period. Until about the end of the 13th century, about 1283, I think is almost the precise date we have. We still don't know exactly who invented them or how they came across it, but it was in Italy, and it was most likely a local artisan in Pisa that put together essentially 2 lenses onto a bit of bone.
Before that, was there the single lens, the magnifying glass?
Just about, yeah. I mean, some of this is complicated by different theories about how the eye works. So for a long time, people felt that there's a theory called extramission, which essentially meant that the idea that your eye blazed out beams of light, which then absorbed what it was seeing, rather than the other way around, which, as we now know, which is light entering our eyes from objects and then forming in the retina and so on. So these two medical and philosophical ideas about how the eye works really don't get sorted out until around Leonardo da Vinci's time, until the Renaissance period. So that's something of a hindrance for thinking about how to correct errors of vision. But the reason why this person in Italy is it's considered, it's more likely to be a jobbing artisan rather than a monkish figure or a proto-scientist who actually got round to this. So, the glasses arrive in, the tail end of the 13th century, and they're two lenses, and they are to correct effectively what's known as long sight. Amusingly, for those of us of a myopic cast, it then takes another 200 years before anyone bothers to reverse this type of lenses to deal with short sight. And there are many kind of theoretical reasons why that might have been the case. But essentially, it's largely for people who are getting older, who get what's known as presbyopia, which is age-related long-sightedness, which affects most people, because your eyes, the muscles in your eyes and the lenses in your eyes deteriorate. That's the bit where anyone who's middle-aged will notice themselves moving bits of paper further away from themselves to be able to see it, because their muscle is unable to focus as quickly as it has been. So that's what the first glasses are creating. Now we're in Soho, and again, so these glasses, these nose spectacles, so varieties of nose spectacles, then hang around until about 1720. Good old Edward Scarlett, who's an optician, spectacle maker in Soho in London, has a shop in Dean Street and then later one in Macclesfield Street. He invents what are known as temple spectacles. So they're spectacles with side pieces, which and often with spikes that would go, or wig spectacles would go into your, so to hold them in place.
Right, so men and women all wear wigs.
Yeah.
So you don't bother actually trying to hook it behind your ear. The first thing to do is stick it into your wig, and which also, of course, tells you the kind of people who are using them, the people who can afford to wear a wig, right?
Sure.
So it's good to know that actually the spectacles took a leap forward right here in Soho.
Yeah, and that's related again to the character of Soho, that many people may be familiar with the now defunct optical train of Dolland and Aitchison. Now, the founder of that firm, Peter Dolland, i.e. Peter from Holland, his grandfather was a French-born Huguenot. I think his father was a French-born Huguenot. They were originally silk weavers working in Spitalfields. And similarly, certain areas of London, Hatton Garden, Spitalfields and Soho, which had those communities in them, and then later German and Jewish immigrants, were big areas for opticians. Hatton Garden, as well as it's famed for its jewellery, but a lot of optical works.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because just around the corner from my flat was the watchmaker. Of course, Clerkenwell, lots of people making watches, but my memory of him was with a pair of very strange spectacles, these very heavy, elaborate things, which I guess really were sort of super magnified, because of course he would be fixing
jeweler's
absolutely
lens
tiny,
exactly.
tiny mechanisms in watches.
Yeah. The idea. So there are temple spectacles, which can hold your spectacles on your head, and then suddenly spectacles with arms which fix at the back and so on. I mean, there've been sort of attempts at this before the 17th.
You mean with the ear hooks? That was
well, the ear hook things are the ones with the curled hooks on the end, are largely traced back to riding, and were some of the earliest types with the proper full-on ear hooks were actually on show at the Great Exhibition in 1851.
Riding, you mean? Yeah. So you wouldn't fall off when you're
on a horse. And
genius.
So
it's a bit like the kind of sports headphones, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But so there are all these curious types of spectacles. But it takes until the 1720s for someone, i.e. Edward Temple, there is a rival in France, obviously, for this, to actually come up with the idea of effectively having spectacles with what are known as sides on them in order to keep them in place. But then what happens in a way is that because people who are wearing spectacles with sides on so they, maybe artisans, so they can have their hands free and so on. So there's a slightly aristocratic rebellion against having spectacles with sides. So hence you get things like the quizzing glass, which is a single lens on a stick. Or the lorgnette, which is
the lorgnette, of course,
exactly.
right.
So these are discrete things, and they're almost used like fans, tripping forward slightly to the idea of glasses being fashionable. They're exotic, expensive creations to begin with, for the most part, though actually there are often cheaper glasses.
So they became associated with artisans and people who needed to work in some way, like the watchmakers or something like that.
Yeah.
Craftspeople.
Yeah.
So then the posh people didn't want the ones with the ear hooks because that implied that you needed to work for a living. And then there was also this thing with women didn't seem to wear them at all either. And then, but the lorgnette came in, which if people don't know what it is, it's a pair of glasses without side bits, but on a stick, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's something rather lovely about it, actually, lorgnette. And I quite like it because you just use it when you need to.
Exactly.
I say that as though I've got one, but I haven't. But I mean,
well, it's this,
and it's a bit like the cigarette holder, isn't it?
Yes.
It's pointless in a strange way and overly complicated, but there's something sort of elegant about it. Right?
I mean, the thing about the quizzing glass, it's taken up in particular by a fashionable young rebellious set after the French Revolution, who are known and mocked as the incroyables and the marvelous. And they're foppish dandies who wear English coats and have tousled hair, and they adopt as an affectation and as a kind of mocking gesture, quizzing glasses, which is the single one on a stick,
like a monocle on a stick.
Yeah, like a monocle on a stick, and a lorgnette. It's actually where the monocle seems to have evolved from the quizzing glass.
I mean, I quite like that too, because it is something rather dandyish about it as well, and it's the implication somehow that you're a foppish poet.
Yeah.
Who's kind of weak-eyed because of your sort of lifestyle.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I guess to go right back again, the glasses, because they're largely used for reading, and they're adopted by monks and religious people, and also in religious iconography and painting, saints like St. Jerome, who is the translator of the Bible into Latin, even though he dies in about 800 AD, i.e., several centuries before the invention of glasses, Renaissance paintings of him depict him with glasses on because he is the translator of the Bible. And obviously the religious element is quite interesting as well, because there's a certain tension with the idea of improving eyesight. If your vision is God-given, then surely you should trust it and not allow artificial devices.
Yeah.
And that feeds into the idea of glasses as being deceptive, and that whereas of glasses are untrustworthy in some way. So glasses are associated with the aged and the old. They're not associated with the young and thrusting. Also, because they are nose spectacles that you've got to pop on your nose, you can't really be very physically active with this type of spectacle. So there's cases of Leo X of the Medicis, the Pope, but he has a single lens on a stick, which apparently he would take out while hunting. And there are all sorts of other weird contraptions of glasses being on headbands and so on to keep them in place.
And Teddy Roosevelt, of course, popularised the pince-nez. Right?
Well, the pince-nez had existed slightly before that. Yes, the pince-nez is another one of these odd things. We've cracked the thing. You can have glasses with side pieces on it, and then out of the blue comes this aberration, the pince-nez. This
jam it on your nose.
Jam it on your nose. So there's a whole strand of spectacles where it's about making them as discreet and unobtrusive as possible, and particularly for women as well. There's a whole ream of material about how unladylike somehow or other, we use that word in its historic sense, how unladylike spectacles are, and how women shouldn't. And again, this goes down to lots of ideas about misogyny, about vision, about whether women should be able to look people in the eye.
What do they need their eyes for, anyway?
Exactly, other than to be, decorative and pretty.
Yeah.
So,
or sewing, I suppose.
Yeah, the idea that women are to be looked at rather than to look out, and so on. So there's a whole strand of stuff, which obviously doesn't actually culminate, but produces, Dorothy Parker's great quip.
Men don't make passes with glasses.
Exactly.
But interestingly, talking about Dorothy Parker and that time, actually something does seem to change, doesn't it? Because I suppose if you see your glasses as prosthetics, there's something wrong with you, or you've got a disability of some sort, and it's to correct that, then it's not very attractive. But suddenly the 20s, 30s, particularly in America with the movies and stuff, they start to become quite stylish, don't they? Something changes then. It's like, okay, we've got these things, let's make the best use of them, right? I mean, Harold Lloyd, I'm thinking.
The glasses are part of making him an everyman character. He's supposed to be slightly the boy next door. There's an interesting thing that his glasses are made of plastic, and this is the celluloid age, and movies are coming in. Obviously, earlier glasses were made from real tortoiseshell.
As the 20s roll on and the frames get thicker, and
they go in either direction, don't they? I mean, and in This Side of Paradise, F. Scott Fitzgerald's debut novel, he describes a fashion among young university types, and obviously some of Harold Lloyd's movies have university settings, called the slicker, which is the idea of this character who wears these heavy round glasses and slicks their hair back. So it becomes quite fashionable at that time. There's also, around the same time, you have a fashion for rimless glasses, very minimalistic glasses. So it puts the glasses into the boy next door. It makes them an ordinary facet of life. At the same time, though, you do have things I mentioned in the book. It's a little bit later. I think it's not till 1940. But the Bette Davis film Now Voyager, in which she plays an on-the-shelf spinster who, when she first appears, she's wearing a kind of hideous dress, hideous shoes, hideous hair, and these glasses. And Claude Rains, who plays her psychiatrist, who reclaims her, ceremonially breaks her glasses and sends her on her way, and this new glamorous looking
Sol's glasses. But I mean, you've also got in the 20s and 30s, haven't you, I'm thinking of Le Corbusier, the architect. He makes those very heavy rimmed glasses so stylish, aren't they? Because then it's really firmly planted amongst the intellectuals. He's not a comic.
No,
I mean, he's a deep-thinking, sort of ideologically driven French philosophical person who's going to change the world, and he's wearing those heavy glasses. And of course, for architects, those glasses became sort of de rigueur.
Exactly. We still talk about architect glasses.
Architect glasses, right? So there's that's going on in the 30s. But the other two things I was wanting to drop in, which is you mentioned already, is the Ray-Bans come along in the 30s. But also, this is the birth of the shades, isn't it? Now, I brought in, as you know, my late 20s skiing goggles with green glass and with protectors at the side to keep the light out the side. But this is the time when shades, which are very important in the counterculture and youth culture, that's when they emerge, right? As sort of a very, very important kind of cousin of the spectacle.
There's a long history of tinted lens glassing. But Pepys, for example, when he goes to see his opticians in London, or his spectacle makers in London, he experiments with coloured lenses, and there is a whole strand of history in a way of using coloured lenses, predating the spectacle even. I mean, Nero is supposed to have used emeralds to shade his eyes while watching the game. But you're right, when we're getting into the 1920s and 30s, a lot of it's associated with sports and also driving. Because we have once we have the motor car, obviously a lot of motor cars essentially look like the front of a horse carriage with some petrol engine stuck on the front of it. Not much shade, not much protection. So originally motorists, and also aviators have to wear goggles. So there's an association with a type of glasses which are go-getting, daring, modern, adventurous and stuff. So that
and wealthy, I suppose, as
and
well.
Wealthy, yeah. So that again is bound into the idea of eventually, sunglasses to protect the eyes from the sun, and then you obviously have the drift of the American movie making industry to California, because California is more open to allowing these new industries to set up that. But obviously California is nice and sunny, and Hollywood movie stars are going to have to wear glasses when they're driving around the lots and walking around. So it brings this other level of association of glamour with it. Prior to really the 20th century, if you're wearing tinted glasses, that's probably because you've got something wrong with your eyes.
But also, if you are of a certain standing in society, you probably wouldn't be out in the sun. But straight away, for the first time, the shielding yourself from the sun is immediately glamorous. It immediately says movies.
And Fitzgerald again on the summering on the French Riviera, whereas the elderly English would always go in winter for their health. So that the transformation away of the suntan. So once the suntan arrives as well, and glasses become a part of that accoutrement, because although you want the sun on your body to tan, you don't want to be blinded by the light, so you will wear sunglasses. So again, so sunglasses become about that's fashionable thrusting. They're associated with sports. They're associated with driving. They're associated with golfing, even leisure,
right? And I mean, also simultaneously, you've got the Ray-Bans, as you said, getting going, the German company, and straight away it's your eyes deserve the best in sun glare protection, cool, comfortable. It's all this stuff, and they immediately look cool. It has to be said.
Well, the Aviator, its name is key because it was developed for pilots originally, and the sort of green shade of it was supposed to protect. So again, once planes start to get higher and higher into the atmosphere, they're facing fierce light, and so they need protective goggles. And those again, they find their way into civilian use originally as a sporting glass, and then come the Second World War. Military commanders wear these types of protective sunglasses when they're on manoeuvres, and so they again attract these glasses which are to do with aviation and the military and so on, then become flipped into countercultural style.
Well, I mean, just before we jump beyond the Second World War into the sort of late 40s and 50s, when it really does sort of kick off style-wise, I just wanted to mention one of my early associations with the subjects of spectacles is in a film, and actually, of course, in your book, I must say as well, is that you do go into film, you do go into to literature. It's all in there. But of course, you'll remember this: is that in The Great Escape, Donald Pleasance is playing the part of the British soldier whose job in The Escape is to forge documents. I don't know if you remember this, actually.
Of course, yeah.
But there's a great and rather heartbreaking scene in it, which is that because he's doing all this work very close up with lenses and stuff, is that he's gone blind.
That's right.
And he wears glasses, these very thick hour-like glasses, of course, but his eyesight's getting worse. And in fact, there's a sort of scene with Richard Attenborough when Richard Attenborough has sussed that he's going blind, and they sort of play a trick on him. He's got to pick something up off the floor, and he trips up and stuff. You haven't that scene? It's a wonderful scene, and it's James Garner. I can't remember which character who's the American guy who feels for Donald Pleasance and takes him with him anywhere. And I remember that was one of my first associations with glasses in the war. But sort of post-war, then specs do become cool, don't they? Shades become cool, specs become cool. You've got this new style, haven't you, which kind of comes out. Talk about that. The kind of classic guy, the Mad Men.
In the 1930s, what are known as pantoscopic glasses are developed, and they're glasses where the arms or sides, to use the official phrase, I always call them up, the hockey stick bits, for people, move from the middle of the frame, where they often were, up to the top of the frame. It just allows better centering of the lenses and greater vision, better peripheral vision on the side, because you haven't got the
things sticking in
the middle of the way. And this is done for technical reasons initially, but it means you get the creation of, for women, what are known as the Harlequin style spectacles, which have the pointy bits, slightly cat's eye looking ones. And for men, the horn rims that we would be familiar for people like Buddy Holly, and also some of the jazz musicians, Dizzy Gillespie and stuff. I mean, in the book, I make the point that there's a piece in the New Yorker from 1960 where, in one of those talk of the town style articles, where he goes to an optician's because he hasn't seen as many of the old wire style glasses that he remembers, and he meets this Mad Men-esque character who's selling the idea of the heavy framed glasses, and how he's got all these clients who are lawyers who thinks they can charge more if they're wearing these heavy framed glasses and so on. So it's this fashion, it becomes very fashionable in a way to wear heavy horn rimmed glasses made of plastic, Zill horn rims, and I argue in a way that this is the point of the two things about it. One is the glasses are always relatively associated with knowledge, and this is in the post-war period where science and we're going to land on the moon and all this sort of stuff is coming along, and it's also where phrases like wonk and nerd start getting used for the first time. And I see that there's an interesting synergy. I mention Le Corbusier actually in that section because I think it's when his ideas of architecture really get embraced, and he becomes a real figurehead for post-war architecture.
But it's also the atomic age, isn't it, as well?
Exactly.
And so science is
science.
becoming cool in some ways.
Exactly,
it's becoming cool and sophisticated. It's the wonk. It's cool to be the wonk. And then, of course, the whole thing with de Bernay and the advertising industries is that the advertisers now start to be seen as these kind of sophisticated manipulators, psychologists, effectively.
Exactly.
Right? So the wearing the glasses for them is a kind of another sign of their kind of their superior knowledge of the human race, right? Brains, right?
Yeah.
But
they have a better perspective.
They've got a better perspective. They can see things better than you can.
They can see the future. So in a very futuristic age, the spectacles. Which are people appearing on Buckminster Fuller and co on, turning up on television, expounding all these the ideas about what the new world is going to look like, all wearing these heavy lensed glasses, and one of the characters which people remember more fondly from childhood, Brains from Thunderbirds, with Joe 90 as well, with these big spectacles, and so it becomes cool in a way to signal your cerebralness in art and music and so on by wearing these heavy framed glasses.
Well, let's shade straight into the counterculture there, because of course in terms of music, I'm thinking Will's Conover, his Voice of America, his jazz share that was broadcast into these. So the image of Will's Conover is he's got the jacket, he's got the shirt, maybe the small tie, and those glasses. He looks cool. Yeah. Cool as fuck. It's the jazz. It's the cool jazz sophisticated look as well, isn't it? And that is when, for me, it's starting to. That's something very countercultural about that, isn't it? When it moves into that world, right?
Yeah, I mean, Dizzy Gillespie, bebop. Dizzy Gillespie, Milton Jackson, Monk. On the genius of Monk, he's got this extraordinary sunglasses with these sort of black with some odd gold additions that he has on the front cover of his debut album. So the whole thing about those Blue Note covers, well, very striking imagery, and part of the iconography and imagery of that is these jazz men wearing glasses, and also bebop is moving away from showmanry and what they saw as, quite rightly to some extent, demeaning minstrelly stuff. It's moving into hard, it's putting. Well,
also it's moving away from dancing as well.
Yes,
it's moving into sitting down,
thinking about
what and admiring the sophistication of the play.
Yeah,
rather than the kind of like flinging yourself around, which of course makes wearing glasses quite difficult.
Precisely. So
even with hooks on.
So there's even adverts in the back of Downbeat magazine for bebop glasses with either tinted or clear lenses, so you could have the look even if you didn't need glasses yourself. And this is the whole thing of. In more recent years, the hipster glasses, with glasses with clear lenses that you're wearing because you like the look, but you don't necessarily need to wear glasses.
Before we move away from rock and roll, though, we should just do the Buddy Holly thing, because the thing about Buddy Holly is that that he really made that his look, didn't he? And I don't know whether he was short-sighted and needed glasses or it was an affectation, but
no, he was short-sighted.
It's the interesting thing about that, and with some of those other people from the time, is that. You could be rock and roll, you could be super cool, young, and wear glasses. Right?
Well, he made that happen, really. No one really before him in the rock and roll thing. Obviously, Bo Diddley, but even Bo Diddley, I think on Bo Diddley's first album cover, he's sort of squinting out with no glasses on. I mean, he looks very odd. He looks disarmed without his glasses on, in a way. But Buddy Holly, Buddy Holly's original glasses, not his original ones, but the ones just prior to the ones we think of most famously, he wore a style of glasses which was known as a brow line. Malcolm X wore brow line glasses, and they're the ones in a way where you have the horn rim top and then the metal bottom underneath. I describe them slightly as if they're like Groucho Marx's eyebrows have been drawn on the top, and then you've got the metal bit below. And those were one of the most popular, I wouldn't necessarily say fashionable, but one of the most popular style of glasses in America. One of the historians of American glasses said something by the mid 50s, something like 50% of all glasses in America were brow line style glasses. They were huge everywhere, which then made them rather a conservative style later on. But so Malcolm X, for example, wears brow line glasses, and in a way he wears them, well, probably because he likes them and he needs them, but also they make him look respectable because they're glasses, and in a way he's an interesting case in that way because, he looks like more like a school teacher rather than than a radical, and that's part of his look. So anyway, Holly has those type of glasses. He tries to wear contact lenses. It's an earlier attempt at wearing contact lenses because he thinks they're not very rock and roll. But he's taken up really actually by the Everly Brothers, the Crickets as well, because they're Hicks from Lubbock, whereas the Everly Brothers, although they're from Kansas, have been around the block a few times and they know New York well and stuff. So they introduce Buddy Holly to their menswear store, Phil's, I think it's on 3rd Avenue, which was an Ivy League style thing. So the whole thing of Buddy Holly wearing those matching tartan jackets and things, which Bo Diddley was also wearing as well, but it's a sort of Ivy League look. They also were the ones who suggest that he should probably get some more interesting glasses, and not hide the fact you're wearing glasses. Get some glasses to say, I'm wearing a glasses.
Well, that was a genius style tip, wasn't it? I mean, changed the world. So
therefore, the Everly Brothers are partly behind Holly's the big black horn rims that he wears, and those are the ones really when he goes off and does his his solo recordings, working with strings in New York and so on, gets married, and sadly they're also the ones he's wearing when he dies in the plane crash, and they are discovered and then rediscovered about 20 years after the plane crash in a drawer.
Where are they now?
I think they went back to the widow. I don't know where they exactly are now. But
On the subject, same sort of time, moving across, from him to the Beatniks. So the other person I was interested in was Allen Ginsberg.
Yeah.
Because he's wearing those glasses, isn't
he?
He
is.
In the late 50s, he's got that kind of Ivy League look too, actually. And it's all part of that thing, isn't it? On the road, the beats.
Yeah.
And it's, intellectual Buddhism and all that sort of stuff all mixed up together. The interesting thing about Ginsberg is that because he keeps his specs all the way through, but he's the rest of his... I mean, I think he changed towards the end, but his specs stay the same. Everything else changes.
Exactly.
I've got a funny story about Ginsberg because Miles, Barry Miles, as you know. In fact, I've got a picture of Miles with Ginsberg, and
Miles was a rather sporter of striking spectacles in the 1960s as well.
Indeed, he was very stylish indeed. But there's Miles told me that Ginsberg stayed up just up the road here in Fitzrovia with him when he came to London quite a few times, and he told me that he'd often sort of get up in the morning and come out, and Ginsberg would be there naked apart from his glasses.
Yeah. Well,
changing the fuse in the fuse box. So the first sight he got of him was his arse, and then full of glasses.
If we scroll forward, that we have that image of John Lennon and Yoko Ono on the Two Virgins cover where they're both naked, but he has his little round glasses on, and that's it.
Yeah. So actually, that's good timing, isn't it? So nice segue there, Travis, because we're deep in the counterculture there. So we'll come back to the sort of shades thing. So Ginsberg's wearing them through, and then Lennon starts to wear those little round glasses, doesn't it? And one of the puns in your book, one of the excellent puns, working glass heroes. That's a good time to bring Lennon in. Give us the story of Lennon's glasses. Did he need them?
Yes, he did. He had been given glasses at the age of about 8, I think it was, and hated them and disliked them because he, in his words, he said, and this was his phrase, he thought they were sissy. So he tried as hard as possible never to wear them, and would tuck them into his jacket. And he wore contact lenses on stage where he could. Off stage, he just had a pair of fairly ordinary horn rimmed glasses that he wore when he was out of the public eye. So he needed glasses. they've just recorded Revolver, and he has gone off to Spain to make a film with Richard Lester. And Richard Lester had obviously worked on A Hard Day's Night, and they were making it's a war satire film called How I Won the War, starring Michael Crawford. And Lennon, he was given a bit of a haircut, and he was also given these round pantoscopic glasses. They're the standard in a way. You could have got them on the NHS. They're round. They had a plastic mock tortoiseshell frames on them, and he wore those when he was making the movie. And he came back from making the movie with a new song called Strawberry Fields, which he'd been strumming around with while waiting in a hotel in Spain for his next shot to be taken. The film was a bit of a flop, but one thing that came out of it was that he kept the glasses.
And Strawberry
Fields. So he appears in not only but also the Dudley Moore and Peter Cook wearing his new glasses, and they become part of his look from then on, really. And it comes at the point in a way when the Beatles have stopped touring and they're retreating in. Again, it's this intellectual thing. They've retreated into the studio to do their work, and they're thinking themselves as more serious artists in lots of respects. So Lennon's adoption of the glasses becomes at that point in the Beatles' development is in motion anyway. John Sebastian from The Loving Spoonful is already wearing little round glasses and has a song called Four Eyes on their second album, which is all a kind of from the point of view of a bully attacking a spectacle wearer. But
that should have been my theme tune. And I was saying to you earlier, one of the things that I noticed is that there's quite a few bands around the time. I had one member who wore specs.
Yeah.
That if you check out bands, it's okay if one person is wearing glasses,
and usually not the singer.
Not the singer, but if there's two people wearing glasses, it doesn't kind of quite work somehow. Actually, I noticed that Blur. Because it used to be just Graham who wore glasses in Blur, but when Dave started wearing glasses, I thought they went downhill. It doesn't quite work anyway, but it is interesting because so there is having one person in the band who wears glasses. But we should talk about Hank Marvin as well, right?
Well, Hank Marvin was told by another musician that he shouldn't wear his glasses on stage. It wasn't fitting, wasn't very rock and roll. And he defied that.
Right.
And again, I'd argue that. And Hank is also, he represents, again, this wonkish thing. There he is with the Fender Stratocaster guitar, this astonishing space-age piece of guitar equipment that he's playing. And, in some respects, it might as well be a rocket ship or something from Mars that he's employing. There's an element that he's the technician as well as the guitarist when he's playing that instrument and making those kind of sounds. The Shadows. Cliff himself becomes a glasses wearer a bit later on. He's a bit of a covert glasses wearer until about the 1960s. And when he finds God and then starts wearing glasses, perhaps again, right, like the Blur, maybe that was the point when it went wrong.
It all started to go wrong. So the other thing which I mentioned to you earlier, which is quite interesting, and it's been coming up a lot actually, different way that women were treated in the counterculture, or in youth culture, or in rock and roll, whatever you call it, is that there's much less women who publicly wear glasses in the rock and roll and counterculture world. I mean, I was sort of nipping through, and I could only really find Janis Joplin. I'm sure there's lots of others as well, but that was the one that stood out. That kind of Victorian prejudice against women being cool and wearing glasses kind of gone all the way through, you think?
I think it still lingers. I mean, there's still there was a report done a couple of years ago about one of the dating sites and how people got less swipes if they appeared without their glasses on them when they did, for women anyway. Nana Mouskouri is the exception to the rule in
not
a way.
A deeply countercultural figure though.
No, she's more in the easy listening,
Europop
canon. It's extraordinary actually how few women in pop with glasses that you see.
Grace Jones, a little bit later, but then of course some of the famous ones, Roy Orbison. Now, of course, Roy Orbison, that was an interesting one, wasn't it? Because he did have serious eye problems, didn't he, as well?
Yeah, yeah.
And yet he kind of turned it to his advantage, right?
Well, again, he I suppose he is, because he wears the tinted glasses at the point when the tinted glasses are not solely associated with problem vision. They've already become associated with a certain degree of rock and roll cool, and therefore he rides that wave, as it were. I mean, obviously Stevie Wonder, who is blind, and obviously Ray Charles as well. But because of the music they make, I'd particularly argue with someone like Ray Charles, because it's really at the front of R&B and is very cool. Gets away. I mean, there's a whole strand of blind Lemon Jefferson, of old blues guys who were in a way are being rediscovered in the 1960s by the counterculture.
In the mid-70s, of course, there was a sort of easy listening duo, Peters and Lee,
There was,
who made us. They sort of traded on the fact that Peters, or was it Lee, was blind and wore glasses. I mean, it was part of their kind of shtick in a way, wasn't it?
The other figure who doesn't hide away from his glasses wearing and makes a great, it's hardly very countercultural now, but is of course Elton John.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm just thinking myself, in the 70s there was the explosion of the kind of star-shaped glasses, wasn't there? The sort of the totally over the top. Definitely. Psychedelic eyewear, whether they actually worked or not, but they became. I mean, for Elton John, they were part of his industry.
Yeah, I mean, you have there's a piece in Vogue in 1966 in a big spread, a feature called something like how to wear it devastatingly is the regular feature, and they run one on spectacles and these oversized, wacky coloured 60s glasses. So even including actually a almost like a lorgnette, to his back and
Sly and the Family Stone, and there was the whole disco glasses.
Yeah, I mean, some of the disco glasses thing is obviously shades. There's the shift in a way that something like the Aviator in the 60s, which is a sunglasses, the frame starts being used as a spectacle frame, and becomes very fashionable and very cool. Again, probably because it has a military-esque association. And Gloria Steinem, the great feminist, wore these big aviator spectacles with a slight tint for the most part, but made wearing those kind of glasses look quite cool. And then slowly that starts to come unravelled, and aviator spectacles start to be the worn by serial killers and computer geeks, Gates and so on, where these and they become very unfashionable. They've never really quite recovered. They've been worn ironically. We think of something like Napoleon Dynamite in the early 2000s hipster style movies. But the fashionability has never quite. They've never really recovered from the serial killer computer geek.
No, that's
phenomena.
true. That's true. But in the 70s, of course, the other thing which happened is punk, of course, which changed everything. And I had Roger Burton in from the Horse Hospital, and Roger was telling me, because of course he was a clothes trader. Yeah. In King's Road and during the mod and the punk era. And one of his big hits as a clothes trader was Wraparound Shades. I think Roger was probably responsible for the outbreak of wraparound shades in the New Wave era. Yeah, he sort of saw somebody in France actually wearing them, and then sort of came back and got a guy here up in Harleston to spray various shades, various kind of day glow colours and stuff like that. And so you couldn't see through them. They were so sort of poor quality, but they were a big hit. They caught on big time. And then of course you've got the going into the sort of post-punk era. We've got to talk about him, haven't we, Morrissey? Because he's going back to the Buddy Holly thing. Elvis Costello,
Trevor Horn and Buggles and so on. So the figure who gets slightly overlooked because his later success is so flamboyant in a different way, is Adam Ant, who wears clear. If you watch Jubilee, for example, for part of them, he's wearing clear NHS square glasses. The clear ones were normally dispensed to women, and again, the same with the pink and the blue ones, because they were considered, more feminine in whatever that means, or whatever that at the time. But that was certainly who they were prescribed to. You normally prescribed. Young girls would tend to get the blue or the pink glasses, and young boys would tend to get the brown or the black ones. But Adam Ant in Jubilee and Father Is That wore these NHS clear glasses with a leather jacket, with muscle bound and so on. So it was an interesting combination of imagery and.
So you're sort of projecting mixed messages of sort of vulnerability and strength
and strength and so on. Elvis Costello is obviously, he again, part of the element of, he's the combination of his name as well, the fact that he calls himself Elvis but wears these glasses is again a nice punky play on what a pop star should look like.
And he's with the emphasised with the kind of gawky posture as well, with the kind of knock-knee posture.
Wearing those slightly oversized jackets. So wearing, it's got quite a 50s look, hasn't he? Wearing the fluorescent socks and the crepe shoes and the bolo ties, but with these glasses, so picking up more of a, he's called Elvis, but it looks more like Buddy Holly.
Right, exactly.
And but you're right. I think, Morrissey's original image when he first burst onto the scene in 1982, 83 really, wasn't it? Is, he, at the time when everyone's wearing, big shoulder pads and trying to look futuristic for the most part, not everyone obviously, but he appears in a woman's blouse. He's wearing his NHS glasses, and at one point he's also sporting a hearing aid as a nod to Johnny Ray. So he's wearing these things which would be mockable as badges of pride.
They're very anti-rock and roll.
Yes.
And it was a bit like we're in this together, I'm one of you, wasn't it? And that's what, of course, people loved him for. That was one of the things they really loved him for.
Right? He in an interview, he didn't actually wear his glasses that often. He did wear, for the most part, he actually wore contact lenses, but he did once say in an interview that maybe the Smiths should have been sponsored by a firm of opticians in the way that certain groups were sponsored by Levi's or Wham, I think, was sponsored by Tashini, the tracksuit maker, or certainly they were given lots of Tashini tracksuits to wear. So Morrissey certainly makes that geek chic thing is at the forefront of that.
Another band, Smiths, where only one person wears glasses, by the way. I believe Morrissey would not have stood for another member of the band appearing in specs in public. I'm sure the other members of the band wore specs, but that wouldn't have worked, would it? You see,
probably not. The other band that I remember making glasses wearing seem fashionable and cool, and who were also quite cerebral, was Japan and David Sylvian. So Morrissey certainly helps forge this idea. And also we have to remember in 83 when he appears in his National Health glasses. National Health glasses are not long for this world. So and folding into the 90s, we have there are fashions for big colourful frames become very. People like Keith Haring, for example, who has a range of spectacles, some of which look like they could have been Swatch watches or something.
The tinted glass comes back, doesn't it? As well, pink glass, and then the plastic frames and stuff. The white plastic frames.
This is the thing. Essentially, plastic lenses get a lot better in the late 80s. There's a new coating to prevent them being scratched, so glasses get lighter, so you can have bigger frames, and people start having more colourful frames and so on. So everything goes a bit haywire. Things maybe get a little extreme in the same way that people's jackets get big and shoulder padery, and people start wearing brooches and things. So it's the big suit with the big glasses.
We haven't really. The story of shades is such a big one, and it's always been so associated with rock and roll, hasn't it? As well, particularly rock music, of course, hasn't it? The shades, and I'm thinking of even Jason from Spiritualized, and I can't remember does he ever appear without shades on in his photographs?
But Andrew Eldridge.
Andrew Eldridge. We should talk about Sisters of Mercy. Now they all wore mirror shades at the same time. So that's it, isn't it? The shades, as you were saying earlier, apart from they've got the image of glamour, and then when you get the mirror in as well, is they've got this kind of somewhere between alienated and rejecting the viewer, isn't it? Because you're not. If the eyes are the windows of the soul, you're not going to get any look at my soul. That's the message. Is that the message of the mirror shade?
I am soulless.
I'm soulless. I'm super cool as well. Or not. Or Michael Jackson as well, of course, with the mirror shades.
Jackson also, the other frame our style of frame, which I haven't mentioned, which is probably worth mentioning from the 80s, is Cazals, which was a German brand, which was picked up by American hip hop artists. There's even a hip hop act called the Cazal Boys, who have a song called "Snatching Casuals" because people did mug for each other for casual glasses. Often not with wearing the lenses, but in the video for Bad, there's a section. There's a very long video for Bad before the song starts up. There's a discussion of wearing casual glasses and so on. So these are badges that of honour of people like Run DMC wear them and make them as much a signature of early hip hop as the 808 drum machine. And so
right, that's interesting. And of course, then you've got the kind of, I'm thinking the Matrix.
Matrix is kicked into that point around the millennium where glasses suddenly get small again, very small, narrow lens.
And a bit more insect-like as well.
Yeah, exactly. There's
I think,
futuristic slightly.
Yeah, and I think doesn't Morpheus? I think he has a pair of pince-nez, doesn't he? He sort of puts these little sort of tiny little shades onto his nose.
I haven't seen it since it came out, so I.
Still looking good, I think.
Yeah.
And of course, Matrix 4 is out next year. It's going to be interesting to see what style the glasses are.
Well, this is it.
Yeah, but I think sort of like a lot of things, I think in the noughties and maybe now, they've sort of, it's not they've lost their way so much, but it's just that they don't matter so much anymore, does it? I mean, whether you wear glasses, you don't wear glasses, the styles, those strong styles that you talked about, you talk about in the book, the Wayfarers and the Ray-Bans and those classic styles, Now, you could see them all at once, couldn't you? You could walk through Shoreditch, you could, on one street, you could see all of those styles, probably including a lorgnette, actually, these days.
Yeah, probably. I mean, within a few years, by the time, say, Jarvis and the retro thing has fully formed in some respects. I mean, Jarvis also wears contact lenses, but it's become... retro. But it was the great phrase that the awful Ariel Pink used, retrolicious.
Yeah, I mean Jarvis made this sort of geek chic was back, wasn't it?
Exactly.
The sort of the school teacher turned rock star.
Exactly.
Sort of look.
So it's come full circle in that way that. And also, in a way, we've gone beyond that now. In a way that no one thinks someone who's wearing a pair of big glasses is doing it for a laugh or for some very advanced fashion statement. They're just wearing it because they think they look cool, and maybe they look cool, maybe they don't. But all the styles, with the internet, everything exists at the same time. And of course, there are styles which go in and out of fashion or become more and more fashionable. I'd say at the moment we're in and apparently all the predictions are of our Zoom lives is that bigger and bolder glasses are apparently hipper at the moment because you look better on Zoom with more distinctive glasses, and that again that how we represent ourselves online will change the types of glasses that people will wear. I mean, there was a revival slightly of the mirrored shade a few years ago, where people seemed a lot more comfortable with them. And I wondered if that wasn't something to do also with selfies. Is that when I was a teenager and people were mirror glasses, we had that slightly revulsed reaction. If people were wearing mirrored sunglasses, you felt slightly unnerved by it. But because people are now fairly used to observing themselves on little screens in their hands,
they actually prefer it.
They're seeing their own image doesn't bother them in quite the same way. And
do you think you can get away with stuff if you wear glasses that people who don't wear glasses can't get away with? Do you think that people regard you as less likely to be violent if you're a glasses wearer, or that you're obviously more intelligent, more bookish, but I mean also that you're sort of less threatening if you wear glasses? I mean, I think so. I think that if I was walking in the street and you sort of did an A/B test and there's somebody walking towards me who's wearing glasses, I think I'd feel very slightly less threatened by them.
Maybe. I mean, there's the element about it that might be that we as glasses wearers, I can't speak on behalf of the entire glasses wearing community, a terrible phrase for that is, but I mean, you are conscious of your weakness that someone has only got to come and punch me in the face or whip my glasses off, and I'm intrinsically disabled because I won't be able to see as well. I would have to find them in order to be able to negotiate, the space. It would be hard for me to, get on the right tube or whatever without. So
you
my
actually,
glasses.
in fact, you are more vulnerable. And of course, in literary terms, the character that springs to mind most is Piggy in Lord of the Flies.
Yes.
Because he's the fat kid, isn't he? He's not only is he fat, but he wears glasses. Yeah. Probably NHS glasses. And actually, of course, when the bullies on the other tribe, as it becomes, sort of deliberately steal his glasses and break them, he's fucked, basically.
Yeah. I mean, how many sort of spy or films you see where the person crushes the glasses under their foot as a. But it can. I mean, Hitchcock uses glasses often to indicate something sinister as well, and and quite a lot of German impressionistic movie makers did this as well, which is to have, again, to go back to the idea of the mirrored glasses, which is to shine the light on the glasses so the eyes can't be seen, creating a slightly disturbing impression. If we think back to even the Indiana Jones movies, the most sinister Nazi is the guy with the little round glasses and the leather coat.
That's right.
So I think
Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah, Strangelove as well. Though he's tinted, aren't they? Again, he's wearing almost sunglasses. So there's an element that glasses sometimes have an association with sinisterness as well. P.G. Wodehouse is credited with being the first person to use an American slang phrase for glasses, which is cheaters.
Right. I mean, at the beginning, I started off with that jazz song, Jeepers Creepers. Woe is me, I've got to put my cheaters on, right? But, Travis, the other thing which we mentioned earlier, which is kind of quite interesting, is that how wearing glasses in a place like the Soviet Union during the various waves of terror and when Stalin was basically issuing edicts for numbers of people to be arrested, irrespective of whether they'd done anything or not. Yeah. So there was a kind of basically anybody who was seen to have been part of the intelligentsia was high up on the target. So I mean, people were literally getting arrested for looking intelligent, right? Well, so wearing glasses, of course, would have been a sign that you were from that particular intelligentsia class, and so therefore became a dangerous thing to do. So people stopped wearing their glasses.
Well, I mean, that's certainly the case that happened with the Khmer Rouge, who murdered people who wore glasses under the idea they were part of the intelligentsia. That was enough to get them executed. And I'm sure probably, there's probably, in a more benign way of thinking about some of those things, there are probably people who, for fear of looking too intelligent, didn't wear their glasses and loused their homework up because they couldn't read the blackboard or whatever else, to put a less horrific, and that slang phrase, in a way, cheaters, implies that you're getting away with something that you shouldn't really be able to see, but these glasses are a deception, and so there's this distrust. Goethe, for example, distrusted people who wore glasses, disliked people who wore glasses because he felt he couldn't trust them because he wasn't seeing all of them. And again, this idea in a way that somehow or other also that the other person might see more than you somehow or other. It's also why, if we think back to detective fiction, Sherlock Holmes, maybe not in the books, but certainly in the iconography, has his magnifying glass, and his perception of events is much sharper than anyone else's.
You just reminded me of the masterly portrayal of Crippen by Richard Attenborough.
Yeah.
He when he talks, he's polishing his glasses, isn't he? And it's deeply, deeply sinister. We didn't mention Harry Potter, and that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, she describes him as wanting to make a glasses character that was a hero, and also he's the perception of the book. So that's her angle on that. In fiction and film, there sometimes was a shortage of spectacle wearing heroes, and Michael Caine, in the Ipcris file, he is Bond with glasses, and the point about him is he's a spy who sees more than anyone else because he's got his glasses, and they're cool. Yeah.
Right. Well, you do come smack up to date in this, and we haven't got into the sort of Google glasses and all that sort of stuff. That's for some other time. But I love your dedication to my parents, whom I didn't see much of in 2020. Very nice, touching, and a pun as well. Start off with a pun. Travis, I did think so. The book Travis Elborough, Through the Looking Glasses, Spectacular Life of Spectacles, Little Brown, published in a couple of months from now. I did think your designer missed out here because, your surname Elborough, it's got 2 O's in it and it was separated by an R. Surely that was an opportunity to make a spectacle-based graphic around your surname. So there we go. That's it. So, Travis, we got there. That was a wonderful panoramic view, sort of, through binoculars and magnifying glasses and microscopes at the strange story of spectacle. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Stephen. Cheers.
So there we have it. Another episode of the Bureau of Lost Culture. I trust you enjoyed that, whether you're a a spectacle-wearing person or not. Summer's come to London, so I might be able to get my shades on one of these afternoons. I will put a link to Travis's work, not just this book, but all his other multitude of works, in the show notes. You can find out more about us at bureauoflostculture.com and, of course, at all the major podcast providers. If you enjoy this show, leave us a review and we'll see you next time. I'm Stephen Coates. Goodbye.